Cinema Bureau of Investigation, CBI for short. They investigate the C-Files, a mysterious collection of untouched film reviews that were lost for years. Until now. From terrifying encounters with dangerous poltergeists to heart-pounding chases with the galaxy's deadliest aliens, they will uncover their truth. Their mission is to investigate the supernatural and unexplained secrets of the C-Files. Now, here are your hosts, Special Agents Spooky Clutter and Carter Sauce. Long live the King. Hello there, fellow investigators, and welcome back to the C-Files March of the Monsters. I'm Special Agent Spooky Clutter.
I'm Special Agent Carter Sauce.
And I'm Special Agent T-Con.
And today, we are covering the third film in the MonsterVerse franchise, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, released in 2019. And to say that this movie didn't build up hype with the marketing is an understatement. I can't tell you how many commercials and ads I saw for this film back in 2018, 2019, before the film released. This movie was hyped up a lot. And in my humble opinion, it does live up to the hype in many ways. And I'm very excited to get into this film.
Yeah, exactly. Just after I saw this movie, it's the promo for this. I was like, when I saw King Ghidorah for the first time in the trailer, holy shit. This was basically like, okay, this is like a legendary knockout. Okay, who's going to win?
Yeah, I was pretty excited about this film. It was going to be bombshell as I thought. And knowing that they were going to be visiting the Titans was just really inspiring to me. As a kid growing up, seeing all these monsters in their different forms and different, platforms, if you will, from directors and everything that brought the good, the bad, and the ugly. And to see it come to the screen the way it has is only getting better. So, we're a few years after the first movie there, and the Titans are revealed, and we are in for one bombshell of a film.
One of the things I really enjoy about this film is its build-up on certain things. Granted, the opening shot of this film doesn't pull any punches. It shows a alternate perspective to the 2014 incident, where we have our new main characters, that being Mark Russell and Emma Russell, played by Kyle Chandler and Vera Farmiga. And essentially what's happening is they've lost their son in the 2014 attack, where the Mutos invaded San Francisco and that whole fight went down. So the movie is immediately hitting us with a sort of emotional beat, and that will continue to flourish as we get more into the film, where you have that character motivation that we were touching on in the previous episodes. And I'm really glad that they did this, because as much as I love the giant monster action, I agree with some critics that you have to make sure that you have a good human story to go along with it to a certain degree. If you're going to have a Godzilla movie that focuses purely on all the monster fights, for me, that would be awesome. Personally, that would be really cool to see. Of course, with a lot of mainstream audiences, especially here in America, there's always got to have that human connection, if you will. So the movie opening with 2014, with the 2014 incident, you could actually see Godzilla walking around, and then you see the soldiers from the Halo jump with their flares coming down. I thought that was a really cool touch. I like that they were harkening back to the first film in this MonsterVerse series. And it was a really neat shot as to kind of take us back. And basically the gist is that King of the Monsters takes place 5 years after that film. And of course, that Kong Skull Island took place in 1973, so now we're kind of like in modern day, or back to modern day, I should say. And it's really cool because you have a sort of mother-daughter bonding going on with Dr. Emma Russell and Madison Russell, played by Millie Bobby Brown. And one of the things I want to say before we continue with the story is that they got a lot of big-name actors. For example, Millie Bobby Brown is most famous for Stranger Things. So seeing her in another role is really cool. I thought she did a really good job. Vera Farmiga is very popular in the horror aspect or the horror franchises. You know that she's in The Conjuring, and she's also in the TV series Bates Motel, based off of the Psycho series. And you have Kyle Chandler, who was in a previous giant monster film, that being 2005's King Kong. And when you see in the trailer for Godzilla vs. Kong, you see that his character, Mark Russell, is coming back. So this guy is going to see Kong twice now. And I think that's just really cool. So I'm glad that they're bringing this A-list cast in to have some good faces, familiar faces for some people. It's really cool. And it kind of helps connect us with the human story just a little bit because, you know, you see familiar faces, it's easier to connect.
Yeah, I agree with that also. For me, of course, Ken Watanabe and Charles Dance are the two that stand out. And also Zhang Zia, I can't pronounce her name properly, Dr. Chen. And these characters here, like with Ken Watanabe, it goes all the way back to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and of course Batman. Charles Dance has been in a lot. Most memorable for me would be Aliens 3, and then Dr. Chen would go back to Rush Hour with Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan. So those characters for me are familiar. The other folks, don't recall seeing a lot of them, but nevertheless, you know, everybody brought the best out of their acting skills, and like you said earlier, their spooky clutter. I have to say that the human factor was front and center, so I enjoy that. I enjoy the cast. Great job.
Apart from the cast, we also got Charles Dance in there. If you don't know who he is, he's actually in Game of Thrones. And the story, and I would like to add on to earlier where Spooky Clutter said about the 2014 incident, the attack on San Francisco, with being viewed from another person's another perspective. And when they found out that their son died into the attacks, though, like, this movie didn't beat around the bush. They went straight for the jugular. I mean, damn. Opening up with that. And we know why that in the movie why the dad
Mark
is
Russell.
actually Mark Russell is resentful towards Mutos is because they killed his son, though. I mean, how would you feel if someone or something killed your child? And just moments like that, it would just make me sad, though. I would be on the warpath, to be honest.
Well, you know, it's funny because Mark Russell's motivation and sort of hatred for Godzilla reminds me a lot of Packard from Kong Skull Island. Because obviously Packard was very pissed off at Kong for killing all his men.
Right.
And in this case, Mark Russell is pissed off at Godzilla for the death of his son. But we know that Godzilla didn't intentionally kill people. It was because he's fighting off the Mutos, and it was collateral damage. But I do like that sort of compare and contrast with Mark Russell and Packard. They're both on a similar foundation, if you will. They're motivated by the deaths of people they care about. Of course, the results are different. You know, Mark Russell comes to peace with his demons, like Serizawa says in this movie. Whereas Packard he's defiant to the end. He hates Kong when he dies, but Mark Russell understands the importance that Godzilla functions in this world. And there's actually a very emotional scene that we'll get into later, but I really enjoy the whole human and monster aspect because there's a lot more emotion in this film, particularly from the human factor. And you don't see that too much in the giant monster movies. I mean, it's there, don't get me wrong, especially in the older Godzilla films. It's there. It's just with a lot of these typical B-movie films, the human focus is not there. It's mainly just about the monsters, and the humans are just kind of like on the sideline. But they have a happy balance, at least for me personally. There's a happy balance with the monster action and with the human factor. So I think that it worked out for what it was.
Where was Dr. Russell's wife, Dr. Emma Russell? She's a paleobiologist. How was it that she was able to end up with Monarch? I don't recall the previous movie as his wife was in there. She was in the movie, yes, no?
No, okay, so we don't actually get a real explanation about that per se. We didn't see them in the 2014 film. They just brought them on as, to be the new main leads. And apparently they both worked for Monarch at some point, but after the 2014 incident, they left, I suppose.
So it's to draw that connection between Dr. Russell and, of course, loss of his son, and understanding they had a wife and a daughter on the other side connected to Monarch and that whole operation.
Right. I mean, you have Madison Russell, you have his wife Emma, and then you have Mark, and the family split up.
So who devised the Orca device?
Well,
that emits the frequencies?
it was with Emma and Mark. They both worked on it together. But the film says that, or at least from the other characters, they say that Mark was essentially the genius behind it. That he's the one that knows how it works best.
All right, so the British Army colonel, played by not Charles Dance. What's his name?
Yeah, Charles Dance. Oh, the character, Charles Dance's character is Alan Jonah.
Right. Yeah. So Alan Jonah there is the big, former British Army colonel guy, and he's right at the heart and center of what's going on with Monarch and everything. To basically, they're eco-terrorists, to be honest with you.
Right.
And you got the military, the United States military, involved with this at the same time too. And then this ultimate connection that's going to get us down to Antarctica, that would reveal, of course, King Ghidorah.
Right. Yeah, the connection with Ghidorah I thought was really interesting. And one thing that I'm glad that they did was they kept Ghidorah's origin story a little bit of a mystery, but they blatantly say that Ghidorah came from the stars. So in this universe, there are space monsters. Just like in the classic Godzilla franchise, you have space monsters. And that really does open the door for more monsters to come in. I mean, you could have Space Godzilla, you could have Gigan, these different monsters that came from space in the classic Godzilla franchise, you have the possibility of bringing them in. And that's really exciting for the future.
Right.
And there's also a connection from Godzilla King of the Monsters. Like, in there's like a bunch of references to Kong Skull Island, like the Hollow Earth theory, references of Skull Island, videos and footage of King Kong, just moments of that though. Like, I like how this movie, like, there are references to Kong Skull Island and the 2014 Godzilla, like either pictures or archive footage or pictures, and I like how they also had the still shots of the footage of attacking Godzilla on Bikini Atoll, and seeing like King Kong's Skull Island, or just stuff like that. Though it's very interesting. It's sort of like a blink and you miss it type situation when you see those things.
Yeah, there was a lot of blink and miss stuff, to be honest with you, and it's all relevant. So I think it would be good, like even for myself, to go back, watch the movie, slow it down, and literally pause and say, oh, okay, start connecting the dots, because there's so much you're trying to pack into this movie. They did a good job of it, in my opinion. I do want to talk about Emma, how she, this doctor really gets emotional about the whole thing, connecting, human beings to the problems of the earth, and then the necessity to let these creatures basically run rampant across the planet. It's really an emotional, psychotic moment. And even the guy she's working for there, the former
Alan Jonah.
Yeah, Alan Jonah. Even later on, he would be like, this is just wacky.
Well, the way he describes it is that their whole idea or their plan was to unleash the monsters on the world, and that includes Ghidorah. But what they didn't anticipate, I suppose, is that Ghidorah wasn't part of the natural order of things. That's why everything was going into chaos, because Ghidorah is not a natural monster from the Earth. He's a space monster.
But it's the device though that's bringing these creatures.
Right, the Orca. But remember, the Orca is just using frequencies. It's based off of the monster's own frequencies. That's why I say Ghidorah is wrecking havoc, because he's the sort of factor, like the unknown or the unusual factor that in the equation that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah. Well, anyway, nevertheless, I mean, I think that she's Of course, later on she would come around and snap out of her stupor, but she really was responsible for a lot of chaotic things that happened.
Yeah, I mean, unleashing Ghidorah like that,
Yeah.
and one of the first major deaths of the film, that being Dr. Graham. You guys remember she was kind of like an assistant to Dr. Serizawa. I was kind of sad to see her go. It's like it happened so quick too. When we first saw the film in theaters, I saw that happen, and it was so quick. I was like, "Wait, what just happened?" And
Yeah.
then later in the film, they say, "Okay, yeah, she's dead." I was like, "Wow,
Well,
that
it's like,
happened really fast."
look, it's like harkening back to the 76 version when, what's the guy's
Of King
name?
Kong.
Yeah, in 76, when they're on the island and, King Kong steps on Grodin, uh, the actor that played, the guy that was leading the expedition. Remember?
Oh, you're talking about the oil tanker guy. But that
Yeah.
wasn't on Skull Island. That was back in New York.
I know, but it's just like, this guy gets snuffed out like she did. I'm just drawing that comparison with the
Oh,
being
okay.
squashed.
Yeah. And although
So,
in this case she gets eaten, and it's like, man.
oh yeah,
And
wait a minute. Not only did she get eaten, it was like, remember that, Carter, when that guy, one of the soldiers, the airmen, blast out of the airplane and right into the mouth of Rodin, I think.
Uh, into the mouth of Rodin. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. When he was trying to, yeah, the fighter pilot was trying to eject out of there, and he just got fucked. Like, haha. Okay, I'm gonna live. Nope.
yeah, there's a lot more of monsters eating people in this film than in the previous films. I mean,
Yeah.
they kind of started with that in Kong Skull Island. There wasn't a lot of that in Godzilla 2014, but this time around they cranked that up quite a bit.
Yeah, and there's something else too that's important, as since we were talking about the monsters and stuff, is that King Ghidorah is basically a prehistoric alien, and he's here to basically terraform the planet. That's what's going on, and so that's when we get Mothra emerging from her cocoon, and things get really rocking and rolling.
Yeah, I'm really glad that they decided to bring in some of these classic monsters, out of the Toho vault, if you will.
Right.
You have the trio aside from Godzilla of Mothra, Rodan, and Ghidorah. And for the Godzilla enthusiasts out there, this is essentially like a remake of the 1960s Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, where you have Ghidorah show up from space, and then you have Godzilla on Earth. Obviously, you have Rodan show up, and you have Mothra. So seeing these classic monsters come back again for the modern audience in America is really nice to see. The only real complaint that I have about the way that Rodan and Ghidorah was handled was they didn't really have those classic sounds. Like Godzilla and Mothra had their traditional roars, and you had that little hint of the classic roars from those films. But Rodan and Ghidorah, they had their own new roars, and it's kind of sad because Ghidorah and Rodan had some unique roars to them, and I was hoping to hear that. And the same thing with the soundtrack. They had the classic Mothra theme. Obviously, it was a redubbed, or like a remix, if you will. And they had the Godzilla theme, the classic one, in there
Yeah.
as well. But there was a distinct Ghidorah theme that I wish was in there that wasn't. But nevertheless, seeing those monsters come back was a real treat.
Well, yeah, and there's another treat too. Actually, a couple of things I like to say about Ghidorah is that there's a scene where, well, first of all, I have to ask, why is it that you would destroy King Ghidorah in this movie? He's such an iconic power that, if I remember when I was a kid, he stuck around in previous, movies that would come after, I would watch one of the movies and I think he'd show up later.
Yeah, I agree. It was kind of weird that they would just kill him off. I don't know about you guys. I mean, I don't know about you, Carter, but for me, it was kind of weird that they would just blatantly kill him off. And the thing is, he was a big rival. I would have thought that they would have let him stick around. Like, Godzilla beat him so bad he had to retreat, and we'll see him again in another film. But in this case, they just straight up eliminate him.
Yeah, they tore him a new one. Basically, how earlier how they said that King Ghidorah was a terraformer, how he wanted to reshape the Earth in his own image. It's basically like Thanos and the Avengers. Like, he wants there to be a balance. Like, with the snap of the Infinity Gauntlet, half of the population is dead, is turned to dust, and the other is lucky enough to survive. Sort of a balance though. But to him, he just wants to reform how he wants the world in his own way. But unfortunately, he gets torn a new one though.
Hey, Carter.
And
Yeah, go ahead, Carter. I want to ask you something.
there are moments in there that was like, oh shit, and there are references from the original King Ghidorah, I think, where there's a part in there where he eats some electricity and he shoots these giant like lightning bolts and taking out choppers and fighter jets and vehicles all stuff one by one. I'm not sure if that was in the original or if that was just added.
Well, not exactly. Ghidorah didn't necessarily use a move like that. However, you mentioned about references to Ghidorah from the classic films. In this film, Ghidorah is in Antarctica, and he's frozen in ice. And this is kind of a little reference to the 2001 Godzilla, King Ghidorah, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All-Out Attack. That film had King Ghidorah in ice as well, so that's a nice little reference there. And really quick before we go on, because you mentioned Marvel, and in the previous episode, Carter, you were talking about the AMCU, the Alternative Marvel Cinematic Universe. There is a Marvel actress that actually makes an appearance in this film, but it's sort of a blink and you miss it moment, sort of. So you have a few flashbacks to Madison Russell and the family, the Russell family, if you will. And the young actress that plays the younger version of Madison Russell, she's actually the daughter of Tony Stark in Avengers Endgame. So you have another Marvel actress in this film.
Oh, and speaking of Marvel, though, we know that the father, his name again?
Mark Russell.
Mark Russell, he lives at, like, since he's divorced or he's split up with his wife and his daughter, he lives at this cabin on a lake, though, which sort of reminds me of the cabin Tony Stark and his wife and his daughter lived in the
That's
game.
Right.
And where they have this, like, this funeral spoilers,
Right,
it sort of had like this Tony Stark, this Endgame vibe, the cabin.
Yeah, it's funny because there's a few times where people sort of sacrifice themselves, and it's kind of like how Tony Stark sacrificed himself to save the universe. So there's a lot of sacrifices going on here. I don't know about you guys, but I've seen quite a bit of sacrificing.
Yeah, there's a big sacrifice, and I know I'm jumping forward a little bit, but when Dr. Serizawa goes down to Godzilla's lair, I mean, it's the ultimate sacrifice, and I know you guys would like to talk about one of those Easter eggs there, but there's a scene of Dr. Serizawa, making his way up the stairs of, what appears to be a ancient Mesoamerican, Mayan, Aztec type pyramid to sacrifice himself. And it's a complete reverse of those cultures in that time, where it was just a complete opposite. They were actually sacrificing above and dropping dead bodies down the stairs. So this was a very unique sacrifice. It was very necessary. It was important because it goes back to the original Godzilla movie. And not only that is the drawn back scene that we get with the explosion that, of course, kills Dr. Serizawa. But before the whole thing is engulfed in flames because of the explosion, to heal Godzilla, we see what?
Well, there's a reference to The Exorcist, and I'm talking about the original Exorcist movie. So in The Exorcist, there was a statue that was very famous. It was to represent the demon that possesses Reagan in the film, Pazuzu. And this statue, you can actually see it in the background before the explosion goes off, just like T-Con said. So you can see the statue of Pazuzu back there as a nice little reference or nod to The Exorcist.
Right, exactly. And the other statue thing was, to complete my question to Carter, was about towards the end of the film when Godzilla has already destroyed Ghidorah, King Ghidorah, and he's got the head of the dethroned king in his mouth. You see in front of Godzilla a statue of George Washington on a horse. He actually tipped over, but Carter saw that, and I'd like to have your thoughts on that, Carter. Carter Sauce?
Actually, I didn't see that. I think Spooky Clutter saw it, though. He pointed it out, and he came up with the greatest theory that just blew my mind.
Well, the way I was looking at it is that the whole thing about the Revolutionary War was that you had essentially God-fearing people, so to speak. You had your Puritans, God, believers in God. and they were trying to separate themselves from England and the king. And Godzilla, essentially beheading King Ghidorah, like the king of England. The whole thing is basically like an analogy of the Revolutionary War. That's the overall point, and I'm glad that T-Con and Carter Sauce, acknowledge that, because it was just something that I thought about, because it was a little strange seeing that statue of George Washington just slide off to the side, and then you have Godzilla rising up and finishing off King Ghidorah with the severed head. And there is actually something I want to say about the severed head of Ghidorah, and we'll get into that just a little bit later.
Well, let me add in there, I think another thing that probably made that happen was because the filming, some of the filming, of course, was done in Boston, Massachusetts. That's where, the Boston Tea Party, a lot of revolutionary acts took place there, and that's probably the reason why.
Yeah, thank God Zach and Cody weren't there. Am I right?
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to touch on now about Ghidorah's head. So, as you guys know, the way we usually review films is that we'll watch the movie first and then immediately review it afterwards. And something that we forgot to do was stay for the end credits, because there was an end credit scene in this film. And of course, I remember this end credit scene. So I'm going to harken you back to an incident where Godzilla was fighting against King Ghidorah in Mexico in the ocean there. And if you guys remember, Godzilla managed to rip off one of Ghidorah's heads. Well, it turns out that Alan Jonah went to this underground, shady-looking meat marketplace or whatever, and these fishermen had fished out the severed head of Ghidorah. So the sort of working theory is that they're going to use Ghidorah's head for something in this new film for Godzilla vs. Kong. That's just a big theory, but the mere fact that they would have that as an end credit scene is really interesting. And I'm actually hoping that Ghidorah makes a comeback, because we saw that Ghidorah has the ability to regenerate. So maybe what we'll see in later films is that somebody's tampering with the severed head of Ghidorah and somehow finds a way to reawaken the brain waves inside of its head to regenerate a whole new Ghidorah body or something. That might be stretching it a little bit, but the mere fact that they killed off Ghidorah in this film was just really jarring to me. That was the one major thing that was really bothering me.
Well, let me add to that, because in that ending thing too, in the ending clip there was also they were flying by with the clippings of the news and Monarch files and stuff like that, but there was also a suspected second Mothra egg that had been discovered. So that's why I had posed when we were watching the movie that she dies in the movie, but there's another egg.
And that's usually what happens with Mothra in these films, is that, yeah, there's a grown-up Mothra, like a fully developed adult Mothra, but in case Mothra dies, you either have two new Mothras or one new Mothra as like a backup.
Well, what it's doing to me also, it's feeding my, my inner kid, if you will, for a future Mothra that look, I'm just going to float this out there, okay? Because, we got the new movie coming up and everything. And I want to see Kong and Godzilla actually come together at the end of that movie. And I've been staying, spoiler free. Yeah, I watched the first trailer, but that was it. But as I'm watching, this movie, the King of the Mountain, tonight's movie, right? I'm thinking, well, Mothra, she could bring, she's a queen. She can bring these guys together to fight the powers that be, for lack of better terms. And I'm excited to see who that next power that be is.
Right. Although, I mean, then again, I can't really say what's going to be in the new film because I don't know for sure. Right. But once again, we're given hints about the Hollow Earth. We saw this referenced heavily in Kong Skull Island, and we once again hear it here about the Hollow Earth. And I have a very good feeling that we're going to be seeing more of the Hollow Earth in Godzilla vs. Kong, and we're not too far away from it, by the way. We're under 10 days, I believe, and I'm just really excited. This movie got me really hyped after watching it again. It got me really hyped to go see Godzilla vs. Kong, and it's going to be a great time reviewing it. It'll be our first new movie, or more like new recent movie that just came out. It's going to be a good time. And this movie definitely got me hyped for it.
Yes, my thoughts exactly. And speaking of the severed head of King Ghidorah in Mexico. Now, there are some references to the old Godzilla movies, like how Colonel Stein came up with this idea called an oxygen bomb, which is homage to the 54 or 56 version where Serizawa uses it to kill Godzilla. But somehow, this one, they thought that if they use the oxygen bomb on Godzilla, it would also kill King Ghidorah, but it didn't do jack shit on King Ghidorah.
Yeah, it did weaken Godzilla though. And just to put in here really quick, that's one of the things that I liked about the film, but also was a little upset about, is that they brought in the oxygen destroyer, which was really cool. It was a nice little homage to the original 54 film. But the problem is that they just kind of dropped it in there. It was like, oh yeah, guess what? We randomly have an oxygen destroyer that we've been developing, and it wasn't Serizawa that developed it. Obviously, this version of Serizawa is much different from his 54 counterpart, but I kind of wish that they would have hinted at the oxygen destroyer in the 2014 film, and maybe even have a little bit of hint of it in Kong Skull Island, to say that, oh yeah, there's a oxygen weapon in development. That way, that when we get to King of the Monsters, we have the big final reveal that yes, there is indeed an oxygen destroyer that we're going to use against Godzilla. But of course, they just drop it in on us, and it, like Carter said, it pretty much does jack.
It was basically like putting a forest fire out with a water gun, which didn't do well. And I like how, earlier, how Serizawa sacrificed himself in this movie, in this one, to revive or resurrect Godzilla, which is different though, because in the 54 and 56 version, Serizawa sacrificed himself to destroy Godzilla, while in this one he sacrifices himself to revive him or resurrect him, which is sort of like, it's sort of like you're fixing your mistakes.
Yeah, it's like a stark contrast to the original Serizawa and Godzilla, contrast, if you will. But it was a very emotional scene. Serizawa, played by Ken Watanabe, was fantastic. Ken Watanabe is just a fantastic actor in general, and his portrayal of Serizawa was really good. I really enjoyed him, and that scene was very emotional. He actually touched Godzilla on the nose, and in Japanese he says, "Goodbye, old friend." And that was just amazing. That was really pulling at my heartstrings.
Yeah, didn't you also say that there was only one other time that somebody got that close to Godzilla?
Yeah, back in the 2014 film, we had Ford Brody when he was running away from the female Muto, and he saw Godzilla come down, and they actually look at each other sort of face to face, if you will, and then Godzilla gets involved, engulfed in smoke. That was sort of like a reference, if you will. But this one was much closer because Serizawa literally puts his hand on Godzilla. And according to some behind-the-scenes word of mouth, if you will, or reference or resources, they actually made a wall, like an actual wall for Ken Watanabe to touch in that scene. And they made it look like Godzilla's skin pattern. So when he's touching Godzilla in the film, he's actually touching a real thing. They built a wall for it. So I thought that was really cool.
Right. One thing. Go ahead, Carter Sauce.
Sorry. One moment about Mothra is that one of the scientists or professors is actually There's actually a reference to the classic Godzilla era of films. The twin fairies that ate her.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool thing to do. I guess the logic would be that they couldn't exactly introduce the fairies the same way they did in the classic films to this film, because while the giant monster thing is super unrealistic, I guess, the fairies would have been that much more crazy. So they found a more easy, not extreme way to introduce the fairies, where in this case, the fairies are actually humans that worked for Monarch, and there's 3 or 4 generations of twins. Because as you guys remember, the fairies in the classic Godzilla movies were always twins. So you have a more modern and somewhat realistic way of presenting the fairy dynamic connected with Mothra, and I thought that was really cool. That was really well done, and I'm glad that they included that.
Yeah, I agree. I want to say also that for so many years, for me, just after having celebrated my 50th birthday yesterday on March 22nd, and having watched for a long time, even up into my early 20s, I was really into it, kind of faded away a little bit on some of these monster movies. And I think it's because of the effects and stuff like that. But we have to give credit to what the monster universe has become. These giant monsters being able to be put on screen due to the technology that we have available today, they've given powerful visuals to everybody, to all audiences, and it's intense. It's, to me, basically, in my opinion, the visuals are gorgeous and the special effects just speak for themselves. I mean, I don't think I've ever, and I probably never will. I don't know if they can top what they've already done with Godzilla and Kong. I think they could probably go a little bit better with Kong on the facials, but I will say that Godzilla is where he should be right now with the special effects. It's so personable, so interactive, and so scary and so loving too. Because believe it or not, it may look hard, but there is some loving moments there because he could have killed a bunch of people on that submarine, right?
Right. When he gets resurrected after Serizawa makes a sacrifice, Godzilla emerges, and essentially he has a call to arms. I saw this meme on a Godzilla Facebook group I'm a part of, and this is a Lord of the Rings meme where the fires of Rohan are lit, or the fires of Gondor, sorry. The fires of Gondor are lit, and it shows a picture of Mothra saying that the fires of Godzilla are lit, and it shows a picture of Rodin saying, and Rodin will answer, instead of Rohan. So that was a nice little meme there for you guys.
Yeah.
But to get back to the scene, Godzilla does his call to arms, shooting his atomic breath into the sky, and he comes really, really close to the people on that submarine. And at first you think, oh shit, things are about to go down. But then it has a close-up of Mark Russell, and then it shows a picture, and it shows Godzilla, and you have this beautiful mellow tone song playing in the background that's actually a reference to Godzilla vs. Destroyer in 1994 or 1995. And it's the song that plays when Godzilla essentially dies because he's in meltdown, which happens in this film, by the way. Godzilla goes into the burning Godzilla stage that similar to what we saw in Godzilla vs. Destroyer, which is an amazing scene that we'll talk about a little bit later. But the song that plays was really nice. I really liked it, and you could see Godzilla's face, and he was almost like he was calm and sort of almost like emotional, And I thought that was really interesting because, Mark Russell's whole motivation is that because of what happened in 2014, his son died, and then he sees Godzilla and he realizes that Godzilla is the balance. And even Serizawa told him that Godzilla is the key to coexistence with the Titans. And, Mark Russell comes to a peace with Godzilla, and it's almost like Godzilla notices that. It's hard to explain, but it's a really beautiful scene is my point.
Well, you're right, because if I remember right, I think it was Dr. Serizawa mentioned something about coming to terms with a loving approach to your enemy. Do you remember
the way he said it was that because the whole point is that Mark Russell and his current state of mind is because of what happened to his son because of Godzilla fighting the Mutos. And that's representative of a figurative term for demons. Like, you have you're battling your inner demons. It's sort of a metaphorical term for the bad things that have happened in your life.
Yeah.
And coming to peace with it.
Well, let me
not
tell you,
letting it affect you anymore.
Let me tell you about coming to peace. I got to tell you about this Rodin. It was great to see Rodin in the way I saw him, because there's attitude and character there too, but he's a bitch. He will literally bow down to anything that has a power structure, Rodin, and he's a great antagonizer of a bitch. I mean, but he's a guy. I think he's a male structure, but so he's just bitchy. He's like, I'm going to be what I'm going to be, and whoever the power structure is, I'm going to get on my knees and bow. But anyway, a great fun fact is that Rodan was created by Toho and first
Right.
appeared in 1956, the Toho film. And it says that Rodan made his first appearance alongside Godzilla in 1964 Godzilla film, Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, fun fact.
I like to talk about Madison, the character who was played by Millie Bobby Brown. Like Carter, Spooky Clutter introduced me to Stranger Things, and I started binge watching the whole series. And I think season 3 just came out, I presume, or was in the works, or was about to come out. Season 3 was about to air on Netflix, and then it's just moments like that where you see this A-list star from another show, and it's just like there's just moments where you would just like want him or her to do the thing, or just do this amazing thing. And there were just moments in there where I would just love to see Millie Brown just go all L on anyone, or just on either the monsters or the eco terrorists. There was just moments like that, and
Yeah,
whipping out them psychic powers, right?
whooping that guy, going all L on their asses. And one of the there's a familiar face. Now, there's another theory in here that one of the actors in this movie, Barnes, who's played by O'Shea Jackson Jr., if you don't know who O'Shea Jackson Jr. is, he is the son of O'Shea Jackson, a.k.a. Ice Cube from the famous band NWA. And there's the Kong Skull Island, one of the researchers to David Goodman, or John Goodman's character, is actually, he plays Dr. Dre in the bioflick Straight Outta Compton, which is very clever, though.
Yeah, it's nice seeing other actors from different films coming in and seeing familiar faces, like I said earlier. That's really cool.
I want to say that, adding on to what you said, Carter Sauce, about Millie Brown there. What's her first name?
Millie Bobby Brown. That's
Yeah,
her
Millie
full
Bobby
name.
Brown. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she's established herself, and she's a young actress. I think she's only like 17 or 18. And she actually looks like a little bit like a young Carrie Fisher. And nevertheless, she's really good at what she does. She's coming back for the next film, and excited to see her in action again.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So I wanna cover the big fight in the climax of the film, where Godzilla is all juiced up going up against Ghidorah. We have a lot of great visuals, and the fight scenes are pretty cool. The only criticism I have is that we don't see enough fights in the day. In fact, we don't really see many fights in the day at all. And I hope that's something that they rectify in Godzilla vs. Kong, because a lot of the fights in the original Godzilla films, you had your night fights, but a lot of the scenes took place in the day. That way you could see the monsters better. So I hope that they kind of address that in this new film.
Well, let me toss this in here real quick, because you're right. I did notice in the old, I think it was a 56 original Godzilla movie with Raymond Burr, right? 56, right?
Right.
When it was nighttime, it was really challenging to get a real good view. Of course, with the technology, they've done so much better. I wonder if there's a challenge to doing things in the daytime versus the nighttime. I don't know, because I don't understand the special effects.
The thing is that there shouldn't be too much trouble necessarily. I mean, I don't know the first thing about animation editing and coloring and all that stuff doing with CGI creatures and such, but the fact that they were able to show Kong in Kong Skull Island fighting a skull crawler, out in broad daylight, I mean, it shouldn't be too difficult. I think that the nighttime scenery can provide like nice shots for like Godzilla's atomic breath, for example, but they need to have some fights during the day. We need to be able to see that. I mean, there should be a happy balance between night shots and day shots with fighting scenes. They can do it. I'm sure they can. I don't know why they haven't, but it's just something that they haven't done. So, but what I want to touch on, aside from the visuals, is one thing is Mothra. So Mothra's basically her upgrade, if you will, from her original Toho classic Godzilla film appearances to what she is now. I'm glad that they gave her a good graphical update, like to where she could actually fight properly, because previous incarnations of Mothra were a lot more like a furry butterfly, and she didn't really have many useful attacks other than using her scales and knocking monsters over. But this version of Mothra has pincers essentially, and she has a like what is that? Like it's the thing that bees have. I forget the name.
You talking about larvae?
Well, no, the thing,
Stingers.
the stinger.
Stingers.
There you go. Thank you, Carter. Yeah, so she has a stinger, and she actually uses that against Rodin, and I thought that was super cool. Being able to see Mothra actually defend herself properly was a real treat.
Yeah, because if you look at that fight scene, she comes flying in and she's spitting stuff, and she actually
it's like web fluid,
yeah,
kind of like Spider-Man.
Yeah, like a webbing, and she plastered Rodin up against that building.
And Ghidorah, too.
Oh, that's right, yeah. And so it was really effective, and of course, she got messed up pretty bad, but before she did, as she was going out, what she did.
Yeah, she sacrificed herself, and this wouldn't be the first time. She's done that before, where she sacrificed herself to protect Godzilla, and I thought that was really cool. It was kind of like, they had a bond, and seeing Mothra once again sacrifice herself, that's kind of typical for Mothra because that's happened before in previous films, but her energy actually goes into Godzilla, and then Godzilla goes into burning Godzilla.
How does that happen? I want to know how that happens.
Well,
I've never saw it before.
Well, okay, so like I said, when you obviously know that, Serizawa, set off that nuke to re-energize Godzilla. So that was the first thing. And the second thing was Mothra. When she sacrificed herself, her essence or her energy went into Godzilla, and he got into the burning stage, which was pretty intense. And he goes practically thermonuclear because the radioactivity is just radiating off of his body so much that buildings around him are just melting. And that's just utterly insane. And he owns Ghidorah, basically. I mean, we've seen Ghidorah essentially kick Godzilla's ass when they first meet in Antarctica. But now Godzilla is just owning the battlefield at this point. Ghidorah just gets decimated. And it was just a beautiful shot. Seeing Godzilla like orange or yellowish red, it was just insane. And, it's one of these moments where I think, how the hell is Kong going to be able to match up against Godzilla like this? Granted, he's probably not going to be using this form when he fights Kong, but regardless, it's just insane. The whole burning Godzilla scene was just insane.
Well, let me float this out there a little bit, and this is coming from the director Adam Wingard. According to Godzilla vs. Kong director Adam Wingard, King Ghidorah kind of haunts the movie after its death in Godzilla King of the Monsters. Why would he say that?
I really don't want to get into that necessarily because there might be some spoilers, and that's one of the big things. We've been waiting for this movie for a long time because originally it was supposed to come out in March of 2020, but because of the whole pandemic situation, everything just got turned upside down. So now the movie's being released, hopefully, March 31st. And I've been avoiding spoilers. Like, I've been dodging spoilers like The Matrix because there have been so many things that have been leaked out or things that are revealed in the trailers, and the trailers are just showing too much of the damn movie. It's like, just give us like one or two trailers and then just let it go. Let us enjoy the movie in its full form on March 31st or whenever people go to see it, because you're spoiling so much in the trailers, then there's not going to be much movie to enjoy.
Well, what I've learned from the past, as a kid growing up, there was lack of, and then as the years passed, it just progressively just gave the stories away. And I think a lot of films that the directors or whoever's pulling the strings, if they got a film that might be subpar or might even be bad, right? We've experienced a lot of that, right?
Yeah.
We don't need to go into that here, so I digress. But nevertheless, these films may be subpar. They know it, so they drop things. They really drop the movie, the best parts of the movie, in hopes of getting the profit, and that's just a terrible thing to do to your fan base.
Yeah, but I mean, I can see what they're trying to do, and what your argument or your case for it actually makes sense. It's just there's a point where eventually you don't really need to do that, because I mean they've done that for so many movies. But anyway, I digress from that. The whole point is that people have been waiting for a Godzilla vs. Kong rematch since 1962, because that's when the first Kong vs. Godzilla movie came out. So, and that will actually be the movie we review next, and that'll be the last film we review before heading into Godzilla vs. Kong 2021. So, as we wrap things up here, what are your final thoughts on the movie, guys?
My final thoughts on the movie is that even though fans were a little disappointed in the movie, I just like to say that it, on a scale of 1 to 10 on how good it is, it's a 7, because Mothra just got fucked. Okay, she just not Mothra. I mean King Ghidorah. He got torn a new one. He thinks that he's this big baddie, and then next thing you know, there was like, oh, surprise! Guess what? You die. Yeah, sorry.
Well, my final thoughts on this are much higher, much more favored towards the completeness of the film. There are always things that need to be fixed. What this movie set out to be became what it was supposed to be. It was a monster movie. It was Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and they didn't hold back. This is the best for me when it comes to special effects, the fight scenes, creature creation, human reaction, and creature reaction, vice versa, to the storyline. And this is a prime the pump moment for the epic that's coming. And I am hanging my hat on a complete success for this upcoming film. They're not going to mess this up. No, you don't build up like this and then fall. This is only going to be elevated to bigger and better things. So I give it a 9, big time.
Agreed. I think that what really sticks out to me, other than Godzilla being this sort of protector or the balance of nature on Earth, is that they were able to incorporate that storyline and weave it in with the human struggles in a very beautiful way. This movie is very emotional, and you usually wouldn't think that for a giant monster film, but there's a lot of emotional moments that really define this film, whether it be Mark Russell's goals, his motivation against Godzilla and then eventually come to terms with Godzilla, or Dr. Serizawa's emotional sacrifice to bring the King of the Monsters back to life so he can take down Ghidorah. And there's just so many beautiful emotions in this film and emotional moments.
Yes.
And I think that's something to be marveled at, because, as I said earlier, you don't usually get those heavy emotional moments in these types of monster films, but this one really nails it very good, in my opinion.
Well, let me just add this too as we close. Millie Bobby Brown really stole the show from a young actor's performance.
Agreed.
Amongst all these adults who are such seasoned veterans like Robert Dance and all the other folks. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it just right. She gelled at every point in her scenes.
Right, I agree. She was a standout in this film, and she's going to be back for Godzilla vs. Kong, so I'm definitely excited to see her again, along with Mark Russell, played by Kyle Chandler.
And she's only 17. She's only 17 years old.
Oh, really? Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm very excited to get into it, and so we'll see what happens, but that brings our investigation to an end. Thank you guys very much for listening. This film is just really good. I can't give it enough praise. Obviously, I do have some issues with it, but overall, I think that this was a really good film, really well done. The human factor was very good, especially in comparison to the previous 2 films in the MonsterVerse. They did a really good job. So I'm very excited for Godzilla vs. Kong, and we'll see where the MonsterVerse goes from there. And with that all being said, thank you guys very much for listening. And until next time, fellow investigators, remember,
the entertainment is out there.